What would you do if the sound of your starving child's faint breathing were louder than the noise of the enemy army outside the walls? And what if a guard offered you a piece of bread in exchange for you simply not seeing a gate being opened in the middle of the night? Imagine the sour, omnipresent smell of hundreds of sweating, terrified bodies mixed with the stench of overflowing latrines. It is a scent that clings to your clothes, your skin, your lungs. Feel the cold dampness of stone. Walls that never see the sun. A dampness that seeps into your bones and your soul, leaving you in a perpetual chill. Hear the tense silence between the distant thuds of the enemy trebuchet. A silence that is not peace, but a void filled with the quiet weeping of children and the poisonous whispers of rumor and distrust. This is not a dark fantasy. This was the calculated, prolonged agony of a medieval siege, a war fought not with swords, but with time, hunger, and human psychology. What you are about to hear is not the story of knights in shining armor defending a fortress. It is the diary of societal decay, the brutal mathematics of starvation, and the anatomy of betrayal when all hope is lost. To understand that agony, you must first understand the cage. A medieval castle was not just a military fortress. It was a complete ecosystem. An administrative center, a storehouse, the symbol of your lord's power. In times of peace, its courtyards bustled with the activity of merchants and craftsmen. But when the enemy approached, its function changed drastically. It became an overcrowded prison. The gates were opened to welcome the peasants from the surrounding lands, seeking refuge behind the walls. They arrived with their families, their fears, and the few animals they could herd. The castle's population doubled or tripled in a matter of hours. And each new mouth was another grain of sand in the hourglass of survival. This overpopulation was part of the logic of the siege, the dominant form of warfare in the Middle Ages. A frontal assault against high, defended walls was tactical suicide, a waste of lives that no sensible commander wanted to pay. The strategy was much simpler and crueler. Surround, cut off all supply lines, and wait. The siege was a war of logistics and patience. The attacker had to sustain themselves in the field, while you, the defender, had to survive on what you had inside. Time was the primary weapon. Hunger was its ammunition. The great siege engines, the trebuchets, the catapults, the battering rams, were important tools, of course, but their deeper purpose was often psychological. The constant bombardment of rocks did not just seek to breach the wall, it sought to break your morale. The thunder day and night, the vibration of the stone beneath your feet, was a constant reminder that there was no escape. You were trapped, and time was running against you. When the massive oak gates swing shut and the heavy wooden bar drops into place with a thud that shakes the very ground, the initial feeling is not fear. It is defiant security. From the top of the battlements, you watch the enemy army set up its camp. They seem small, distant, powerless against the stone that protects you. Your lord's banner still flies proudly, a symbol of resistance. The walls are high. The storerooms seem full. That first night, the air is filled with the smell of a hot stew, deliberately prepared to keep morale high. The initial rations are distributed generously. There is a sense of shared purpose, of community in the face of adversity. But this security is an illusion, built on an inventory. In the depths of the castle, the quartermaster makes a cold, brutal count. So many sacks of grain, so many barrels of wine and beer, so many head of cattle. Suddenly, every man, woman, and child ceases to be a person. They become a number in an equation of consumption. And the most vital resource is not food, it is water. The well in the center of the courtyard is the castle's beating heart, its greatest strength, and, as you will discover, its greatest vulnerability. You are a young soldier on the wall. You feel invincible. You trade jokes with your comrades as you watch the enemy. You firmly believe in the strength of your walls, in the wisdom of your lord. You are convinced a relief army will arrive long before the provisions run out. You don't understand yet. You don't yet know that the real battle will not be fought with bows and arrows, but with empty spoons and sidelong glances. The psychological war begins almost immediately. The attackers know that your mind is a battlefield as important as your walls. Their trebuchets do not launch only stones. Soon, a different kind of projectile soars through the air. It lands in the courtyard with a wet, heavy thud. It is not a rock. It is the bloated carcass of a cow or a horse, left to rot in the sun. The goal is not to destroy, but to spread disease and despair. Then, the projectiles become more personal. The heads of the scouts you sent out who were captured. They are thrown over the wall, often with a mocking message. They are a macabre reminder of your isolation. Sometimes, a captured messenger is returned to you, alive, but without hands to carry another message, or without eyes to find his way. The goal is simple: to create an atmosphere of constant terror, to make you feel that the outside world has forgotten you, that help is not coming, that you are alone. The weeks pass, and you soon realize that the enemy's arrows are far less deadly than the germs multiplying within your own walls. The castle, once a refuge, has transformed into a petri dish. The overpopulation and lack of sanitation are a lethal combination. The smell becomes unbearable. The garderobes, the castle's latrines, are little more than holes in the wall that dump waste at the exterior base, or into cesspits that are now overflowing. The buzzing of flies is a constant. Soundtrack. You hear the sounds of coughing and moaning in every corner. The most seriously ill are moved to a separate area of the courtyard, but it is a futile gesture. Dysentery, the bloody flux, spreads like wildfire, weakening the defenders faster than any weapon. The lack of hygiene is the true killer. The well water, your source of life, can become contaminated by seeping waste. A small cut from a rusty dagger becomes infected and turns into a death sentence. The ever poorer diet weakens everyone's immune system, making them vulnerable to any disease. Death ceases to be a shocking event. It becomes a daily, casual presence. Bodies are wrapped in shrouds and stored in the chapel, awaiting a burial that may never come. You are now a woman, an artisan's wife, and your only battle is to keep your family alive. You boil the water every day, over and over, but it doesn't seem to be enough. You watch your young son grow weaker, his skin pale, his lips cracked. He has no wound. He has a fever that will not break. Your faith in the healer's herbal remedies, your faith in the prayers whispered in the freezing chapel, it all begins to crumble. The enemy is not outside the wall, it is in your son's blood. Honor, loyalty, courage. You discover that these are concepts for a full stomach. When hunger becomes constant, morality is redefined. Food becomes the only currency, the only form of real power. You feel the physical pain of hunger, a sharp cramp in your stomach that never leaves. The dizziness that makes you see black spots when you stand up. A weakness in your limbs that turns every step into a monumental effort. You taste the flavor of survival. A thin, tasteless broth made by boiling scraps of old boot leather and belts to extract the slightest nutrition. The castle, once noisy, falls into an eerie silence. People no longer have the energy to talk, to argue, to move. They sit against the walls, their gaze is vacant, conserving every calorie. The animals are the first to disappear. The castle's dogs and cats become secret stews. Then, people begin hunting rats in the dark. A rat becomes a treasure. And it is then that you discover the hierarchy of hunger. Because hunger is not the same for everyone. Your lord, his family, and his elite knights always eat. Their rations are reduced, yes, but they never disappear. The garrison soldiers are next in the food chain. You, the civilians, the refugees, the servants, are left with the scraps of the scraps, with the boiled leather and the bitter roots. This inequality, visible in the sunken cheeks of your children and the relative health of the Lord's guards, is what plants the bitter seeds of betrayal. In the darkest corners, in barely audible whispers, the last taboo word begins to be spoken: cannibalism. Stories of other sieges, of survivors who ate their dead. What was once an unthinkable monstrosity now becomes a silent question in everyone's eyes. Life outside the walls, in the Besieging armies' camp is no paradise. They too are exposed to the elements, to the mud, to the cold. Disease also spreads through their ranks. Their own supply lines can be attacked by forces allied with your lord, but they have something you have completely lost. They have space. They have the ability to hunt in the nearby forests, to forage in the abandoned farms. They have access to fresh streams. And most importantly, they have the hope of victory, the promise of plunder, of the wealth that awaits them once your walls fall. The siege is a race against time for both sides, but the psychological prison, the feeling of being buried alive, belongs only to you. When death by starvation becomes a certainty, betrayal ceases to be an act of dishonor. It becomes a cold business transaction for survival. Now you are that guard at the gate. You were once loyal to the core, but every day you see the Lord's cook carry a platter of salted meat and bread to the noble quarters. And then you return to your post and see your own family chewing on strips of leather. For the first time, you don't see your feudal lord to whom you swore an oath. You see a man who is hoarding life while your family starves. And that thought changes everything. One night, a blunt arrow lands at your feet. Tied to it is a piece of parchment, a promise from the enemy, amnesty, food for your family, and a purse of silver. All you have to do is slide the bar on a secondary postern gate in the dark. The sound of a loose stone being moved in the night, the glint of a gold coin in the palm of a hand. Paranoia spreads like the plague. Every shadow is a threat. Every whisper, a conspiracy. You no longer trust the man fighting beside you. He looks at you the same way. Everyone becomes a suspect. The traitor does not see himself as a villain. He sees himself as a father, as a husband, making the only choice he has left. He weighs his loyalty to a distant lord against the life of his child. And in the silence of the night, as he slides the heavy wooden bar, he is not committing treason. He is buying his family's life with the death of everyone else. The end of a siege is rarely a glorious charge. It is a final act of desperation, a spasm of violence, or a silent humiliation. Hear the terrifying sound of a battering ram finally breaking the main gate, a splintering of wood that is the sound of death entering. Or conversely, hear the humiliating silence that falls over the castle when the white flag made from a dirty sheet is raised on the highest tower. Smell the acrid smoke as the first buildings begin to burn. Hear the screams of the skeletal weak defenders as the well-fed enemy soldiers finally pour through the breach. The brutal rules of war are clear. If a castle surrenders, the terms can be negotiated. The lives of the garrison are generally spared in exchange for all the wealth within. But if the castle is taken by force, the terrible law of plunder applies. The victorious soldiers have the right, for a set period, to kill, loot, and rape at will. To fight to the end was a gamble with hell. It is your lord's final moment. He looks at the few men he has left, skeletons dressed in armor. To surrender means eternal disgrace. To fight means the certain slaughter of everyone, men, women, and children. His last decision is not about victory. It is about what kind of legacy his death will leave. Imagine the day after the siege has ended. The first thing you notice is the silence. No more screams, no more weapons, no more thuds against the walls. Just the crackle of the last flames and the buzzing of flies. A lone survivor, perhaps a child who hid under a pile of rubble, walks through the corpse-strewn courtyard. He sees no heroes or villains. He sees his neighbors. He sees the baker, the blacksmith, the guard who used to give him a piece of an apple. And he understands that the strongest fortress in the world was not brought down by stones. It was brought down by an empty stomach. The history of medieval sieges teaches us a brutal truth. Civilization is a thin veneer, easily corroded by hunger and fear. A castle's walls did not just protect from enemy swords, they contained a desperate social experiment, proving that human loyalty is strong, but the need to survive is almost always stronger. In the desperate situation of a siege, what do you think would be the hardest to endure? The physical hunger, the constant fear of death, or the paranoia of being unable to trust anyone around you? Leave your opinion in the comments. If this journey shook you, subscribe to Forgotten Chronicles. Here, we don't just tell history, we relive it.